The now former Navy Secretary Richard Spencer is speaking out tonight about his sudden departure this weekend. The controversy centers around U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer Edward Gallagher. He was found guilty of posing for a photo with the corpse of an ISIS fighter. Gallagher was then demoted, but the president reversed that decision. The Navy was still pushing for a review to determine whether Gallagher should lose his status, hard-earned as a Navy SEAL, and the gold trident pin that SEALs get to display on their dress uniforms. But Trump went online to say the Navy would not be taking away his trident pin. Over the weekend, the Navy secretary was said to be thinking about resigning over this whole thing. By Sunday night, he was forced to resign. Defense Secretary Esper said he had just learned that Spencer was trying to work out a deal with the White House. Let the review proceed, let it go through, and he'd make sure Gallagher would retire as a Navy SEAL. On CBS News this evening, Spencer was asked about the president's involvement in this case.
What were the ramifications of intervening in that review process?
Well, right now, we're not going to do it, is what Secretary Esper says. What message does that send to the troops?
Well, what message does it send?
That you can get away with things. We have to have good order and discipline. It's the backbone of what we do.
Today, our Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, said the president ordered him to let Gallagher retire without losing his status as a Navy SEAL. Here with us tonight to talk about all of it, retired U.S. Army Colonel Jack Jacobs, a heavily decorated combat veteran of the Vietnam War who is one of only 71 living recipients of the Medal of Honor. I know the most you usually discuss Navy is in the context of beat Navy, but thank you for coming on to talk about another branch of the service tonight. Colonel, first question is this. Does the president fundamentally, perhaps, get something wrong about the ethos and culture of the military?
Well, he gets everything wrong about it. He doesn't understand the chain of command and how important it is to order and discipline. Jumping the chain of command demonstrates to all ranks, but particularly the lower ranks, not that you can get away with things, but that you can separate authority and responsibility, which, by the way, you should never do. That if you are responsible for something and you have the authority for it, that you have to go up the chain of command to make sure that things happen. It has the most pernicious effect on the intellectual and leadership development of the lower ranks because they are going to take over one of these days. And if they learn that the chain of command is not inviolate, then we're going to be in really bad shape when they grow up to take command.
You have the great privilege of teaching up at West Point, young men and women who, the day of their graduation, are second lieutenants in the U.S. Army with a 5-year minimum service requirement. How do you teach this to them if they're seeing this behavior in the adults around them?
Well, it makes it extremely difficult. I mean, you can't unsee this. You can't forget it if you're a young person. You're always influenced by what happens when you're young. And when you get into a situation where you have to put into practice the things that you learned back when you were young, they better have been the right lessons. This is the wrong lesson. And both commanders, non-commissioned officers, instructors at the service academies, and in ROTC have to redouble their efforts to make sure that kids understand the importance of the chain of command.
I want to show you from over this weekend the Navy SEAL in question, Gallagher, part of what he said on Fox News, in part going after the CO of the Navy SEALs.
This is all about ego and retaliation. This has nothing to do with good order and discipline. What the Admiral is doing, showing complete insubordination, is not the good example of good order and discipline.
He just accused Admiral Colin Green of insubordination. You don't hear that every day of the week.
No, and now that the president's insinuated himself into the process, it's not going to matter that he did, in fact, say that Admiral Green, in fact, is emasculated's too heavy a word, but it certainly makes him less influential. And one might expect that Admiral Green may, in fact, leave himself.
Hey,
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.